Hello, my name is Officer Kashat, and today I have the distinct honor and privilege in sitting and speaking with one of the original Sterling Township police officers, John Meister. The department began in 1966 and was formed with only 13 officers. 2 years later, it would change to be called the Sterling Heights Police Department. John, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here and also to give some of the insights of the problems we had and how the department has grown.
John, what can you tell me in the initial days of the forming of the Sterling Township, now Sterling Heights Police Department? What do you remember? What was the community like, the police force?
The city was actually fairly small. It was somewhere around, I believe, about 16,000 people. And then within 5 years, it was the fastest growing city in the United States, and it went up to, I believe, close to 100,000 people. The farm fields all grew into subdivisions.
How were you selected as one of the first 13 people? Was there a hiring process? How did you hear about the Sterling Township Police Department?
The chief was originally from city of Farmington, and he kind of picked the people he wanted. Each one had some type of specialization. I had a specialization beginning as a motorcycle officer in Detroit and Livonia, and he asked if I wanted to become one of the officers. Then some of the other officers, like Sergeant Oaks, was investigations. He came from, I believe, Royal Oak, city of Royal Oak.
I see. And what was the chief's name at the time?
Maurice Foltz.
Maurice Foltz. And is there any major, well, let me ask you this. What was the first call or run that you remember being dispatched to upon being hired?
I believe it was like the second day of the corporation, or the beginning of the Sterling Township Police Department. It was a lawnmower fire. And at that time, no one knew much about the police department, even though the county and the newspapers stated that we were going to be, they had started a police department.
Now, I notice in some of the photographs that you have here, they depict your original hiring photos, and then I notice that there's also a photo here that lists the portrait of the police department as it stands. I notice in some of these photos that you guys are wearing helmets. What's the story behind the helmets?
For some reason, the chief believed in helmets. He felt that they would save many of our lives. So that was one of the mandatory things. If you want to be on the department, we had to wear helmets. If he caught us without the helmet on, we've got a talking to. And after a couple of years, then, for some reason, they changed to the hats. But I do agree that the helmets saved some of us when there were accidents and different things that might happen.
I know we spoke earlier and you had spoken about some accidents. Is there any major instances with you being a police officer that really stick out in your mind?
Like I stated, I was more in traffic, and the chief picked myself and Officer Imus to go to the Northwestern University Traffic Institute.
And what's significant about Officer Imus?
Imus, shortly after he came back, probably might have been a year, he was assigned to my platoon, and he stopped a vehicle on the M53 freeway, and next thing we heard, I was in the office, was a citizen had stopped and said, screaming over the radio, an officer had been hit. So I went out there, and it was a bad decision, but I decided that he was deceased. So we called in. We still had the ambulance come and everything like this, but other police departments and everyone agreed. And then it was one of the sorriest days of my life. I must have worked about 50 hours straight. And then I went home, and shortly after I got home, I had not gone to bed yet. They called me back, and they said that a attorney and a priest had the person in custody that caused the hit-and-run accident with Officer Imus.
And you were the lead investigator for that incident?
Yes, I was.
Now, throughout time and throughout the ranks, you would then get promoted, and you would begin to lead the Traffic Services Bureau?
Yes. Even before I was promoted, they had hired several officers more. And the chief agreed that, or I talked to him that, you know, I'm willing to work afternoons and take accident reports. So there for a while, I was the accident officer. And then also with that time, radar came out, and I was assigned to radar. Then I was promoted to sergeant, and I worked a platoon for a while, then back into traffic.
So you began the traffic unit?
Yes, I did.
For the city, which still now is up and running and staffed with multiple officers assigned to that bureau.
Yes, and they're still doing the same traffic agreement that I had started, which was 10-hour days, and with the 3 groups of officers.
Now, John, the police department formed in 1966. 2 years later, it would change into the city of Sterling Heights. Your career here, the city grew. As you come back and you see the city, I understand you live out of state, and meet the officers. Is it a little bit nostalgic for you to come back and not only see the uniform, but see the building and the operations itself? Is there any feelings or emotions that arise from that?
In a way, I feel I was a part of the beginning of the police department. And at this and seeing how things have changed, and I feel that it is still considered as one of the best police departments in the state. And I believe it was Macomb Daily back. They said that we were the best equipped and the most knowledgeable police department.
I would definitely agree. You know, I noticed that you have your ID cards here with your awards and citations. Is there one award that sticks out in your mind? Is there a story about one that you have that you're very honored with and kind of reflect on from time to time?
I would say there's I was assigned to communications. I believe I was shift commander. And it was on a Saturday, and a woman called in and started asking me a lot of questions. And I finally said, "Do you know about this murder?" And she says, "Yes." So I said, "I'm quite busy, but can you hold on while I answer the phone?" And at that time, Lieutenant Gene Lane was in investigations. I called back and explained to him I had a woman on, I think, that knows about this homicide. So I told her I'm going to transfer the woman to Lieutenant Lane. I said, and he's more knowledgeable than I am about this investigation. So I transferred her back, and with the information, they were able to solve this homicide.
Very good. You know, you don't often get those calls very often, and it sounds like that you were able to handle that call, and clearly you were cited for
with the citation. And then there was several others. Another one, we received a report that a car had some automatic weapons, and they gave a description. And I see the car, I'm pulling over. At that time, I believe it was the same lieutenant, Lieutenant Lane, and they sent several other officers to back me up, and we recovered a group of guns. And at that time, guns were not as available as they are now.
Absolutely. And at the time, you didn't have the handheld radios, right?
We had no radios until, I would say, probably in the early 80s.
So a lot of things that you had to do solely relied on your training and intuition.
Yes.
Well, John, you have your book here of accommodations and certifications, and clearly you've done a lot. I am honored that you were able to take the time to sit here. It's always valuable to gather as much information as you can, because nobody can say I was one of, well, I should say not everybody can say I was one of the original officers that started this police department. I think it's a major accomplishment. Just more than privileged that you were able to come to Michigan and spend some time with us in giving us some of this insight that you were able to give. So thank you.
And I'm honored to be here to give a little bit, and I could probably talk hours on the various things with the police department.
And so do you remember your retirement badge number? Does that number stick out in your head?
Yes, badge number 1.
Badge number 1. So thank you again, Retired Sergeant John Meister, badge number 1.